In the journey of your life, you will face very difficult situations. You might be facing them now. This is not something that happens only to you. It is a normal occurrence for all of us. Unfortunately, we tend to think that life should be filled only with happy and enjoyable moments, deceiving ourselves and creating a false reality. Even though we dislike it and try to avoid it, at some point we will face a situation that pushes us to our limits. On the bright side, as human beings, we have the capacity to control our emotions to a greater or lesser extent and to face complex situations more effectively and with less suffering. However, having this capacity as human beings does not mean it is an easy task. No one teaches us how to manage our emotions properly throughout our lives, and that's why I'm making this video today. I will talk about temperance, one of the 4 historical virtues. To illustrate this, let me share a story. Once, a king summoned the wise men of his court and said, "I had a precious ring made with a diamond by one of the best jewelers in the region. I want to keep a hidden message inside the ring that can help me in difficult times, a message I can turn to in moments of despair. I want this message to help my heirs in the future and the heirs of my heirs. It must be small enough to fit under the diamond on my ring." All those who heard the king's wishes were great sages and scholars who could have written lengthy treatises. However, having a message that consisted of only 2 or 3 words and that could fit under a diamond on a ring was a very challenging task. Nonetheless, they pondered and searched their philosophy books for hours without finding anything that suited the powerful king's desires. The king had a beloved servant, a man who had been close to him. He had also served his father and cared for him when his mother died. He was treated as family and respected by all. For these reasons, the king also consulted this servant. The servant said, "I am neither a sage nor a scholar nor an academic, but I know the message you seek." "How do you know?" asked the king. "During my long life in the palace, I have encountered all sorts of people. On one occasion I met a teacher who was a guest of your father. I was in his service, and when he left, I accompanied him to the door to bid farewell. As a gesture of gratitude, he gave me this message." At that moment, the elder wrote on a tiny piece of paper the mentioned message, folded it and handed it to the king. "But don't read it," he said. "Keep it in the ring. Open it only when you can't find a way out." That moment soon arrived. The country was invaded and his kingdom was threatened. He was fleeing on horseback to save his life, pursued by his enemies. He was alone, and the pursuers were numerous. He reached a point where the path ended, and before him was a cliff and a deep valley. Falling would be fatal, and he couldn't turn back because the enemy blocked his path. He could hear the galloping horses' voices and the proximity of the enemy. Then he remembered the ring, took out the paper, opened it, and found a small yet tremendously valuable message. For that moment, it simply said, "This too shall pass." At that moment, a great silence enveloped him. The pursuers seemed to have gotten lost in the forest or taken the wrong path. But the fact was that an immense silence surrounded him. He no longer heard the galloping horses. The king felt deeply grateful to the servant and the unknown teacher. Those words had been miraculous. He folded the paper, put it back in the ring, regrouped his army, and reconquered his kingdom. On the day of victory, there was a great celebration in the city, with music and dance. The king felt very proud of himself. Once again, the elder at his side said, "Dear king, it is time for you to read the message in the ring again." "What do you mean?" asked the king. "Now I am living a situation of euphoria and joy. People celebrate my return. We have defeated the enemy." "Listen," said the elder, "this message is not only for desperate situations but also for joyful ones. It is not only when you feel defeated but also when you feel victorious. It is not only when you are last but also when you are first." The king opened the ring and read the message, "This too shall pass." And once again he felt the same peace and silence in the midst of the crowd celebrating and dancing. However, his pride and ego had vanished. The king fully understood the message. The bad was as transient as the good. Then the elder said, "Remember, Everything passes, no event or emotion is permanent. Just as day and night, there are moments of joy and moments of sorrow. Accept them as part of the duality of nature, for they are the very nature of things. One of the keys to mastering our emotions is to understand and remember that what we are feeling at this moment will not last forever. Do you know anyone who has never experienced happiness, or someone who has never experienced sadness? In both cases, these emotions do not last permanently throughout life. Good and bad things happen as we go through life. When we experience a moment of sadness, it helps to accept and understand that this sadness will pass. Acceptance is not resignation, passivity, or agreement with what is happening. It is simply acknowledging that many things that happen to us are beyond our control. Acceptance leads us to proactivity. It makes us aware that if we can do something or change our situation, all our energy and intention must be directed in that direction. When we accept something, we are better able to move forward. Also, we should not get carried away by moments of happiness. It's fine to enjoy them, but in moderation. We shouldn't let ourselves be swept away by euphoria that makes us forget that this moment too shall pass. People who forget this are never prepared to face life's difficult situations. They live in a bubble that will eventually burst. A Stoic seizes the moment but doesn't forget the reality of life. Just as they endure through difficult situations, they also avoid being consumed by uncontrolled sadness. This is temperance. The story I shared earlier only touches on two emotions, joy and sadness. However, temperance applies to any emotion. There is no emotion that, when taken to an extreme, becomes something positive. Yet nearly any emotion, when managed in moderation, can bring us something positive, even negative emotions, because when controlled with temperance, they allow us to gain valuable lessons for our lives. In the words of Seneca, temperance is a virtue that consists of mastering and moderating our impulses and desires so that they do not lead us to excess or deficiency. In the words of Epictetus, temperance is a pleasant harmony of feelings that results from a life where desires are controlled and reason is our guide. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, temperance is the virtue that helps us govern and direct our passions and desires, avoiding extremes and maintaining a balanced and moderate life. This philosophy of temperance resonates across cultures and eras, offering guidance on navigating the complexities of human nature. In a world often marked by excesses and impulsivity, the teachings of these ancient philosophers continue to offer a compass for contemporary individuals seeking to live virtuously. Striving for temperance fosters not only personal well-being, but also societal harmony, as the principles of moderation and self-mastery contribute to a more balanced and flourishing community.